Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another very incredible live stream tonight. It's your host, Danny Dhaiphong. I'm just going to introduce the program because we have actually a mega panel discussion tonight that is going to, I think, really give you a uh, a really give you an insight into geopolitics and Trump's takeover plan. But this is a direct quote. I envision world people living there, the Riviera of the Middle East. This was Donald Trump's response to a question following his meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, his first meeting with a foreign leader, as to who would live in Gaza after the U.S., which apparently will own Gaza, is emptied of all Palestinians. This verbalized quote unquote plan sent shockwaves across the world, and fears of an all out war in the Middle East, once again breaking out amid fragile ceasefires in Gaza and Lebanon, violated now in the thousands by Israel, are once again peaking. But every word, every plan uttered by political leaders managing the U.S. empire's war machinery have consequences, human, geopolitical, economic, and otherwise. We're going to discuss all of those today, from Gaza, West Asia to Ukraine and beyond, with very special guests. First, we'll just introduce Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector and U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer, geopolitical analyst, and journalist. Thank you, Scott, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We also have Ray McGovern. Ray is a co-founder of the Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. He's also a member of Veterans for Peace, an analyst himself, a former CIA analyst, as well as geopolitical analyst today. Ray, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Danny.
And then we have Larry Johnson, geopolitical analyst and author. Larry, thanks so much for coming on today.
Yep, I put the scream in live stream.
Everyone, as we get started, please do hit the like button. That helps boost this live stream in YouTube's algorithm. But let us get started. I wanted to begin, of course, with Donald Trump and his meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu that shook the world after comments that he made both during his presser with Benjamin Netanyahu as well as afterward. Here is just one of the comments he had during his time with Benjamin Netanyahu. We're just going to take a listen to his Gaza takeover plan. Here it is.
The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative. It's right now a demolition site. This is just a demolition site. Virtually every building is down. They're living under fallen concrete that's very dangerous and very precarious. They instead can occupy all of a beautiful area with homes and safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100.
So I wanted to just play that before I play the next clip. I'll kick it to you first, Scott. Talk about these comments in the context of both the geopolitical reality here and what we've actually just witnessed over the last 15 months. And, we're in the middle of a ceasefire. Benjamin Netanyahu comes to Washington, and then suddenly Trump makes these comments, which seem to they've not only shocked the world because this is literal ethnic cleansing being proposed, but it comes on the heels of a ceasefire, which has causes to it. And I'm curious if you would talk about the realities behind the spin here.
Well, gee, thanks. Danny, I think everybody agrees on at face value, what Trump said is so unrealistic as to it'd be unbelievable. You can't believe that a rational actor would give voice to literal ethnic cleansing, the theft of land. Never once did he talk about the ownership of the land that belongs not to the United States, not to Israel, but to the people of Palestine, the Gazan people. So this would be theft on an unimaginable scale. There's no congressional support for this. I mean, the president, what he could just go around and just designate territories around the world. He's not a king. He's not an emperor. He's a president. So when I looked at this, I mean, when I first heard this, I don't know if people read my Twitter. I was up all night. I couldn't sleep because it was just like, this is so ridiculous. And so I was just banging out, criticism of this. But at some point in time, as an analyst, you got to step back and go, what really is going on here? Because you've got to look at rational, explanations for this. And I don't know if there is a rational explanation, but I'll put it this way. You mentioned 15 months of fighting. Israel was at war with Hamas for 15 months. Israel tried to take over Gaza for 15 months. Israel got their asses handed to them by Hamas for 15 months, and Israel withdrew from Gaza under pressure because their military could no longer sustain the fight. And I bring that up because if you're Donald Trump and you're becoming president and your goal and objective is to create Middle East peace, that's what he says it is. And you're looking at the Gaza problem, and now you're bringing Netanyahu over to talk about the Gaza problem, one would logically think, and most presidents would say, what's Israel's plan? But the fact is, Israel doesn't have a plan, not a plan at all. And into this vacuum steps Donald Trump with a plan so audacious, so ridiculous, so absurd that it can't be ignored. If you saw Netanyahu, and the thing that got me thinking this way is just watching Netanyahu's body language, he was not happy about any of this. This is a man who is gripping the podium, looking at the president just going, what the hell is he talking about here? He was insulted. He's the prime minister of Israel, being told by the president of the United States on national TV, the whole world watching, that he's incompetent. He can't do the job. He can't finish the job. I, Donald Trump, am going to do the job. Now you'll say, but is Donald Trump's solution a solution? Of course not. On the face of it, not. But who is Donald Trump? Again, Ray's the one who taught me to think like this, to dig a little bit deeper. Donald Trump's not a diplomat. He's not a statesman. He's a New York State real estate businessman. And when you sit down with a real estate businessman in New York to talk business, somebody puts an offer on the table. The people that say no are kicked out of the room. You're not part of the game anymore. He's looking for a counter offer. And I think that's because this is so ridiculous, so illegal, so impossible. It's literally impossible for him to do what he says he's doing. He can't do it. He's put an offer out there, and he's challenging the people not just to say no, but to say, hey, no, this is so crazy. We got to come up with something, because there has been no solution to Gaza. This is my guess. I'm just guessing. I'm spitballing because it's the only thing that allows me to believe that there's sanity in the White House. Because if I'm wrong on this and Donald Trump actually believes he can do this, then we are literally being governed by a madman, by an insane man who is dangerous, not just for the world, but for the American people. And it's something that we have to reflect on. I don't want to believe that that's the case right now. So I'm going with, parsing this out, thinking that Donald Trump is simply look, this is a man, you know how he opened up his gambit for North Korean dialogue. Rocket Man, fire and fury. I'm going to nuke the Korean Peninsula, take them all down. Next thing you know, he's walking across the DMZ, shaking hands with Kim Jong-un. How did you get from A to Z? He's a man of extremes. And so I'm just hoping that this is just a case of Donald Trump challenging the world to come up with a different solution. If you don't want this to happen, because Trump has literally told the Israelis, you're no longer the solution. You are the problem. And he cut them right out. There is no Israel. Did you notice that? Where did Israel fit in Donald Trump's plan for Gaza? Nowhere. Nowhere. Not there. Why? Because they can't be trusted, because they can't do the job, because they fail to do the job. Yeah, we can parse out. We know who dropped the buildings. We know whose bombs those were. We know. I just think Donald Trump's statement to the public was so ridiculous that it can't be real. It literally can't be real. It has to be a ridiculous opening gambit to generate dialogue amongst Europe, the Saudi Arabia, and everybody else, for them to come up with an alternative to America committing suicide in Gaza, because that's what it would be. We would lose this war. I know there's a bunch of chest thumpers out there, and look, I'm a Marine. I know for a fact we could go in and we would kill Hamas. It's what we do. We do it better than anybody else in the world. But we will lose a lot of Marines. And I remind people, we killed a lot of Vietnamese. We're pretty good at that too. Killed a lot of Koreans. Hell, we killed a lot of Iraqis. We killed a lot of Afghanis. We lost every one of those wars. Lost every single one of them. And we can roll into Gaza and kill a bunch of Gazans. We're going to lose that war. Why? Because it's an unjust war. Because the military activity doesn't align with a legitimate political outcome. And they have to. They have to align, or else you lose the conflict. War is an extension of politics by other means. So this notion that we're going to go into Gaza and fix this thing. No, we're not. And I think Trump has to know this. I don't think there's a military person in uniform that's telling them, this is a good idea, boss. I'm like, we're on board. I don't think I think they're all saying exactly what I'm saying. We don't want to do this. Don't order us to do this. If you guys remember the history in Iraq, the Marine general, I can't remember his name right now, during Fallujah, when the Blackwater guys got zapped and dragged through and hung up and burned, he went to the president and he said, we got this under control. We have videotape. Special forces are tracking these guys. We're going to get all the guys that did this, bring them in, and we're going to shut this thing down. Do not order us to go into Fallujah. It will be a nightmare. He said, we'll do it, but you won't like the outcome. You won't like what we're going to do. You aren't going to like how we do this. And then the other thing he said is, if you send us into Fallujah, don't stop us. Once you say go, we go. And you know what the president did? Sent him into Fallujah. And a couple of days later, he went, holy shit, the Marines are being Marines. Stop. You can't have this. It was a disaster. That's what will happen in Gaza. I don't know what Trump thinks is going to happen, but the military will say, don't send us in. But if you do send us in, don't stop us. Because once we start, it's going to get ugly really quick and stay ugly until the job's done. In about a weekend, when the bodies are coming in and the video is horrible, and Americans are watching Americans kill innocent civilians and blow things up, and Americans come out bloody and dying, the uproar is going to be crazy, and Trump's going to go, stop. And the military is going to say, we warned you. We told you what's going to happen. And now you're stopping it, and that's the defeat. That's what's going to happen. There will be no. And so I don't believe this is a serious plan. It's not who's going to invest in it? Look at the stupidity of what he said. We're going to go in there and remove all those unexploded ordnance. No, you're not. You have no idea how to even begin that. How do you do rubble removal? Where are you going to take the rubble? You're going to, is this going to be Berlin all over again, where you build a giant, a giant rubble mountain and then put a SIGINT site on top of it? Donald Trump literally has no plan. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And I think this is deliberate. I think he doesn't like Netanyahu. That's the other thing people need to understand. He doesn't like Netanyahu. He's the guy that put out, let the videotape of
Jeffrey Sachs
criticized. Why would Trump do that? Because Trump hates Netanyahu, despises Netanyahu. Trump, this was about jabbing it to Netanyahu and then challenging the Saudis are on the fence. If you're Donald Trump, think about it. No Arab country is here to help you. No Arab country cares about the people of Gaza. I mean, Yemen, apparently, the Houthi do. Lebanon, what are they? Shia, the Shia of Iraq. So the Shia care about the Muslim Brotherhood in Gaza more than the Sunni Arabs do. No Sunni Arab nation is lining up to say, we're with the Palestinians. Even the Palestinians aren't with each other. Abu Mazen is undercutting Hamas every day. He is so jealous that Hamas won. He's so angry that Hamas won. He wanted Hamas destroyed because he's an Israeli tool. The Palestinians are split. The Arab world won't support. And so Trump's basically saying, if you guys don't step up to the plate, this is what's going to happen. It's not going to happen, but he's maybe doing the Richard Nixon madman theory. Who knows? But I don't know. This is just my desperate attempt to try and bring some sort of rational framework around the insanity that we all heard last night.
Larry, I wanted to pass it to you, and in the context of what was just said, there's one, like, what message is being sent to who. There's always this, is he trying to parse out a deal to pressure actors? Well, it's hard to know what, for me, like, who these actors would be, given that the proposal completely excluded Palestinians altogether, which you would think that would be number one. Who would be part of a deal of what to do about post-genocide Gaza. But then there's also, I wanted to ask you, Larry, about, the reality that Scott just laid out, if you could flesh out too.
Sure.
In my opinion, Israel just lost pretty significantly militarily. And now the United States is saying they're going to go in with an unbelievable kind of posture into Gaza and escort all the Palestinians out. That's what it sounded like to me. So, Larry, your reaction?
Well, first, Trump sort of blew up the settler narrative. This land is our land. God gave this land to me. Nope. Trump's taken part of it over. It's American land now. That's what he was saying. So he was not acknowledging in that the Zionists would have control. He was actually, in a way, sending a pretty bizarre message. And I think Scott's observation about Bibi Netanyahu's body language is accurate. The other thing to remember is this was entirely scripted. Trump was normally Trump's not reading from a note card or reading from a teleprompter. He was reading from a note card. This had been prepared in advance. Who wrote that up? Jared Kushner, for his real estate investment, maybe. But this is part, I chalk this up also to, Trump's showmanship. I'd encourage everybody that's watching now or listening, go Google on YouTube, Donald Trump and Vince McMahon. The time that Trump appeared in the ring at a World Wrestling Federation event. And, was breaking chairs over people's heads and, throwing sucker punches. There is also, I'll call it, I don't want to suggest that this is lighthearted entertainment, but Trump was saying some things there that, both simultaneously on some side takes heat off of Netanyahu at home, who's politically, he's made promises to, skip the first phase of the ceasefire and violate the second phase. In sort of a bizarre way, I think what Trump was doing was trying to buy time. Now, we're going to take Gaza over. We'll resettle it. We'll move all the Palestinians out. And, what's Netanyahu going to do? Go back and say Trump's a liar? That's not going to happen. Trump, no, he can't say that. It was sort of an odd way that Trump boxed Netanyahu in. The other thing I noticed was just the contrast between the appearance of Donald Trump, who's 4 years older than Netanyahu. Netanyahu looks like a sick man. He does not look healthy. He's had, Ray McGovern's way older than Bibi Netanyahu and looks far better than Bibi Netanyahu. Bibi Netanyahu would like to look like Ray McGovern. But so there's some health issues there with Netanyahu. So, and then the practical thing, Trump keeps saying, I've talked to the other Arab nations and they're all on board. And today, Turkey was out saying, hell no, forget that. MBS in Saudi Arabia was going, he learned to speak Russian. He goes, niet means niet. It's not going to happen. And it's only going to happen if there's a Palestinian state. So I don't know what Trump has up his sleeve. You saw today he walked it back a little bit because it's an idea that's not fleshed out. And as Scott correctly noted, he's not in a position to send U.S. troops in there because that would be a bloodbath. And all of a sudden he's going to be bringing home body bags and greeting them at Dover. He doesn't want that image at all. And maybe I'm jumping ahead, but this was, like I said, this was all scripted. All of his pontification about Iran. Boy, Iran, if you're building that nuke, we're going to get you. Well, we already know that the Ali Khamenei hasn't given them the green light to build a bomb. Until Ali Khamenei says go, it's not going to happen. And on January 17th, they signed a deal with Russia, where Russia's vowing to help in the nuclear industry, but that comes with a clause that's not publicized. That means you don't get to develop a nuke. We're going to work with you. It's going to be peaceful, no nukes. So I think we need to step back and, it's easy to say, Donald Trump's a moron. He's an idiot. I keep going back to the Vince McMahon. He's a showman. He's an entertainer in his own little world, and it's worked for him so far. And I think he's, in some aspects, what he said at that podium actually ends up limiting what Bibi Netanyahu can do going forward, not starting a new war.
Ray, what do you think about this? Because, on the one hand, I definitely hear that and could conceive that this plan is absolutely ridiculous and cannot be implemented without disaster for the United States. But on the other hand, we've seen the United States for so long jump into disasters with regard to its assistance to Israel. And while Donald Trump had begun his administration maybe moving away from that with the implementation of the ceasefire, there's still questions about, will actually the United States go for this? Ray, what is your assessment?
I think one needs to be aware of the background of all of this and the fact that Israel has been leading the U.S. into all manner of catastrophes. It's very clear now that they were the principal element in persuading the Bush-Cheney administration and the intelligence community to falsify enough information to justify the attack on Iraq. Now, Scott mentioned Fallujah. What many people don't remember is that was a direct result of the killing of a paraplegic, blind sheikh named Yassin, the spiritual leader of Hamas in Gaza in March 2004. He was killed by an Israeli helicopter, and Sharon was known to have been behind that. Okay, the spiritual leader of Hamas. So why is that relevant? Well, it was just 10 days later that those contractors, what was their name? The kind of contractors we had there.
It was Blackwater, wasn't it?
The Blackwater guys, yeah. There were 4 or 5 of them, and they misread the map and they made the wrong turn, and they ended up in the hands of people who really feel serious about killing the spiritual leader of Hamas. And what happened to them, I don't defend that at all, okay? But that was at the bottom of it. And when those people dragged those Blackwater types through those streets, on the panels of the trucks that they used was Yassin Revenge Brigades. Okay, now Scott mentioned what the Marines were ordered to do against Fallujah. His account, as usual, is extremely accurate. The Marine general later complained privately that this was really terrible and that countermanding this thing. He lost several Marines. Marine commanders worth their salt don't like that, okay? But what happened? Well, actually, how'd he end up? He became the commandant of the Marine Corps. So that too is kind of unpleasant, because if you keep your mouth shut in public, then you become promoted, not demoted. Now, my God, Trump is concerned, you know what the meaning of the word sociopath is? Okay, that's what we have here. A person who has no empathy, no feeling for anyone else. Okay, and he's standing right next to a fellow sociopath. Okay, and not only that, a racist. Now, I was hoping that when Trump made that eloquent presentation about what happened to Gaza, all they know is beyond repair, terrible. And that guy did it. you know, that was McGovern dreaming. He didn't say that guy did it. Okay, so what we have here is a real complicated situation where I think Trump has got what the Germans call Wahnsinn. Okay, it means it's worse than verrückt. It's kind of a delusion of grandeur, a feeling of omnipotence, and that he can do whatever the hell he wants. All right, and nobody's going to stop it. I'm less encouraged at the prospect that our Congress or anyone else in our government can stop this. I wish I had more confidence, but I don't. And I know very well what happened in early 1933 in Berlin. And that was when people could not find their voice. There was no moral leadership. Not the Catholics, not the Lutheran bishops could say a damn word, okay? And what happened, of course, is described by one person who was there, a lawyer training to be a judge. He said there was sheepish submissiveness. Hitler didn't have anywhere near a majority. What happened? The Social Democrats caved. The Christian Center Party caved. And before you knew it, everybody was too afraid to do a damn thing about what was happening to the Jews. That's history, folks. It's not so long ago. I was alive during those years. I never thought that our country would be responsible not only for genocide, but for enabling a psychopath like Netanyahu to try to get away with what he wants to get away with. I am encouraged, in a sense, to hear Scott and Larry say he's not really going to get away with it because the cards are stacked against him. Hamas is not going to be a shrinking violet. So those are my thoughts. I just feel really bad about the fact that we, this is on us. If we're a democracy, cry the beloved country, for God's sake. That was a novel about South Africa, okay? And we have Bishop Tutu telling us, look, you can't remain neutral when this kind of thing is going on. Remaining neutral is being on the side of the oppressor. If the elephant has his foot on a little mouse in the jungle, the mouse does not very much appreciate it if you remain neutral. And so I just hope that there's more spine, there's more moral fiber in the American public that can stand up against this than there was in Germany in early 1933.
Yeah, wise words, Ray. And to get back to you, Scott, what Trump said is definitely hard to believe. Hard to believe it was said so openly. But at the same time, the difficulty for me is how can we trust Donald Trump at this point, given the fact that we know that we have this long history of what just happened in Gaza, and we also have what seems to me a big willingness from Donald Trump to make deals that could very well and will likely be beneficial to Israel in the long run. And so my question, Scott, we've heard, we have all this speculation about, well, what's going to happen. But I'd like you to also if you could get into you mentioned briefly the realities on the ground. Could you talk about, when I think about the United States getting into this in the way that Trump proposes, I don't only think about Hamas either. I think about the entirety of what we just saw in the last 15 months, where there was a regional war escalating. There was resistance everywhere from Lebanon to Yemen, etc. That won't simply go away if the United States does this, will it? I mean, what's your thoughts about if the U.S. decides to go all in this way? What would be the consequences more broadly? Because Hamas certainly will kick ass, but it seems like it would be even bigger than that.
You said Hamas will kick ass?
Yeah, they will, but it will be even bigger than just what happens on the ground in Gaza.
You can't. Don't go there, Danny. Okay, no one's going to kick our ass. Okay, we can lose politically, but please don't ever imply there's a military force capable of kicking America's ass. It's just unbelievable, and we don't want to go there. No one's going to kick our ass. Okay, it's the Israeli Defense Force is not the United States military. Okay, it's not that good. It's a bunch of conscripts poorly trained. The United States military is a far different machine, and so we don't even want to go down the path that Hamas is going to. No one's going to kick our ass, and that's the tragedy. We didn't lose tactical engagements in Iraq and Afghanistan. We won virtually every single one of them. And that's what will happen to Hamas. We will win every tactical engagement. We'll lose some casualties, but it will go our way because we have overwhelming force. We can bring more force to bear than Israel ever could think about being a bear because we have a bigger military. We have a better military. We have better weapons. We have better trained troops. Our troops are so much better trained than the Israelis. We don't even want to consider this option. And the military doesn't want to consider this option. First of all, it would take a tremendous amount of military resources. This wouldn't be a cakewalk. We would have to, bring in a lot of resources that would weaken us around the world. We're not what we used to be. We can't fight 2.5 wars anymore. And this would become a major conflict. One of the reasons why we ended up getting out of Afghanistan, out of Iraq, and why we're going to pull out of Syria is that it's a resource drain. Getting involved in the conflict in Gaza isn't just about, sending in, we're talking multiple brigades going in. We're probably talking about a Marine division, and we're probably talking about the equivalent of another 2.5 Army divisions going in to fight. Now, then you have to rotate these people in. So that Marine division has to have another division. Now you've taken 2/3 of the Marine Corps and you've allocated it to Gaza. But in reality, you're probably all three because the other one on standby is going to be looking at that rotation. This is a huge resource drain. This is what the military is going to tell the president, is we can do this. If you want to do this, it'll be horrible. But it will absorb so much of our capacity that if China decided to have a go at Taiwan, we have very few options left. If God forbid, Russia decided to go at the Baltics, we got no options left. We can't do everything. And, you want to take on Iran as well? We don't have those options. I mean, this is the one thing they'll be saying. Where does Gaza fit into the national security of the United States? When you list all of the problems that the United States is facing out there, from, Trump saying we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Well, that has a potential military aspect there. How do we secure the Strait of Hormuz? Things of that nature. Taiwan and China, there's a military thing there. South China Sea, the Philippines, the whole 3rd Marine Division has been retrained as a littoral fighting force. You're going to pull them out to Gaza. Gaza doesn't even register on the map of national security priorities. So there's this. The Secretary of Defense, when he takes a look at the guidance he's given the military, Gaza's nowhere to be found on that map. Nowhere. So we don't want to talk about Hamas kicking ass and all this, because that's just taking us down the wrong path. We have to talk about the strategic posture of the United States globally. And Gaza doesn't fit anywhere. And yet, if we were to go into Gaza, it would suddenly suck the resources needed to deal with all of these other issues, So this is, I I don't want to get into a military discussion because it's heading down the path. It just simply isn't going to happen, Danny. There's no way the United States is going to war in Gaza. No way. We could run limited hostage rescue missions. I mean, that, we could do stuff like that, but we are not putting a Marine division across the beach. We are not putting an Army division on the ground. It just isn't going to happen because, again, as I said, Larry knows this too, and Ray. If I have a division on the ground, I got to have a division training to replace it. We got to rotate that division out. And that means I have to have another division out. That's a 3-division task. Whenever you put troops in there, if you're talking about, that's why I talk about in Ukraine, they say we're going to put 60,000 peacekeepers, 100,000 peacekeepers. Well, you're talking about a 300,000 man commitment minimum. Plus, you got to put the other 80,000 out there who are doing the logistics sustainability of all that. So to put 100,000 people on the ground is a 380,000 person commitment. And so when you start talking about putting divisions on the ground, because this is a multi-division task here, you're just sucked out the whole strength of America. And then what happens? North Korea and South Korea decide to hook and jab. Where are we getting the brigades to do that? China and Taiwan, we ain't got nothing. South Pacific, nothing. The Europe, nothing. Iran, nothing. Africa, nothing. Oh, God, wait a minute. We want to invade the Panama Canal. Nothing. We've just taken all our forces out and thrown them into Gaza, which doesn't register as any level on our national security priorities. So we really shouldn't be talking about the military at all because it just literally isn't going to happen.
Yeah, and I want, Ray, before I kick it to you, I just want to clarify. When I said the comment, Hamas will kick ass, what I meant was actually kind of what you said, Scott, which is that it would be a quagmire. They would be bogged down. It would stretch the U.S. And also even just the proposal of what Trump said, well, we're going to move everybody. It insinuates that the United States will, who else is the United States going to say? They have to say Palestinians are going to fight back. They don't want to leave, which means there will be a fight. So, but I just wanted to clarify that because while certainly the U.S. Military, as you stated, Scott, has superiority in so many areas, that point about being outstretched and overstretched is really deep on the minds. But Ray, I know you wanted to come in here. Oh, sorry, everybody. Hold on. All right, there you go. You're good now.
Yeah. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Devil's advocate, and I'm sure Scott doesn't mind this. We do this all the time. Iraq didn't fit into what we thought were national threats to our security. Afghanistan, no. Ukraine, no. Is China going to take Taiwan by force? No. Is Russia going to invade Europe? No. There are smart enough people in the Defense Department to know all this. And so if the president in his wisdom says, look, you're going to do this, are there enough people at higher ranks in the Defense Department and this new Secretary of Defense to say, Mr. President, we can do it, but, there's this, that, and the other thing, and, well, maybe it's not a good idea. Is there? I don't know, okay? What you got is a bunch of sycophants. Now, here's an example, okay? The people in Gaza are starving, okay? The trucks lined up by the thousands, and I do not exaggerate, with foodstuffs are not being led into Gaza, okay? Netanyahu says, no, they can't do that. So what does President Biden do? Instead of calling him up and say, look, starvation is a war crime, let those trucks in, he says to his Corps of Engineers, hey, Corps of Engineers, you're really good at building. Yeah, that's a good idea. Build a pier. Build a pier so that we can transport these foodstuffs from Cyprus and put them on a pier, and then what? Will they be able to get in? Will Netanyahu get? Well, let's give it a try. So, what does the Corps of Engineers, the Corps of Engineers, a very proud tradition. Okay, they said yes, sir, even though they knew the damn thing would wash away in about a month, which it did. Now, That's an example of how the military in these days respond to the president. So I'm less certain, and Scott is, that if the president said something really stupid, like we're going to send this Marine division or these battalions into Gaza to help out the Israelis, I'm not sure that they would have the guts or the common sense to say, no, we can't do that because we have these other threats. They might say, well, these other threats have been blown up for obvious purposes. We can do this. They always say, can do, Mr. President. That's what I'm afraid of.
Can I just say something about the pier? It wasn't ever a logistics operation, right? It was a special operation. It was an intelligence collect operation. The pier was a front for putting intelligence capabilities and special operations capabilities forward together in joint operation with the Israelis. And it fulfilled its mission because in the end of the day, humanitarian trucks came off the pier loaded with Israeli commandos guided by American intelligence to carry out a raid. That was the whole purpose of the pier. The pier was never a logistics thing. So the military actually did its job. The military was told to put up a cover, a front, and to position, collect intelligence that could guide special operators into carry out a hostage rescue mission, which they did. But this was never about the Corps of Engineers coming in and building a supply thing, because no Corps of Engineer guy would have said that makes sense. That's why I knew. I mean, the moment they did this, I knew exactly what it was, because I happen to believe that the U.S. military has competent officers who would say, Mr. President, this is stupid. But if they said, no, what we need is a cover story. We need to create, a cover story to do intelligence collection, all that. That's what happened.
It's still stupid.
Yeah. Sure, but there's a different kind of stupid.
Okay.
Yeah, Larry, I want to get you in here about your thoughts on what we've been talking about, because it still stands for me that if there is, and I think what Ray was saying was very prescient in terms of, the United States sometimes does things, a lot of times does engages in foreign policy that isn't always in its interests, especially when it comes to Israel. Do you find that, do you agree with Scott that there is no way that such a thing like this could happen? And if it does, if any kind of action of displacing Palestinians does occur, it seems like that would reignite what we've been witnessing over the last 15 months, which was not only a genocide in Gaza, but also a regional war that has nearly led to war, Israel and Iran, Hezbollah, all of this. What do you say?
Well, let's recognize what happened to the Israeli ground forces in this invasion of Gaza and this genocide that took place. They experienced some of the same psychological phenomena that afflicted the German Wehrmacht that was operating in Poland and Ukraine. I mean, one of the reasons that they led to creating these extermination camps in Poland was because the officers, the Wehrmacht officers, and we're not talking SS, we're talking, just regular army, they were dealing with soldiers who were psychologically suffering from killing women and children. And lo and behold, in Israel today, you've got a significant problem with suicides among Israeli reservists that have served, and they were ordered to shoot children, ordered to kill women. And while there are some psychopaths within them, there are a number that were suffering from that and refused actually to go back. And if the United States, if Trump decided to actually try to insert military force, and I don't think he is or even planning to do so, because I remind you of what Scott said at the outset. Remember Trump's rhetoric, the public stuff he was saying about Kim Jong-un, just extreme off the wall, and then all of a sudden it was all diplomacy and he's meeting face to face. Let's look at the facts that we have, at least over the last month. Trump's intervention via Steve Witkoff brought the ceasefire into effect. While it may not be a perfect ceasefire, it has achieved the release of 12 Israeli hostages. Most of them were women. They were women soldiers. And the images that created went to the benefit of Hamas and to the detriment and created problems in Israel. Alistair Crook has talked about that pretty extensively, because instead of these 3 women showing up on stage looking terrified, looking beaten, looking emaciated, in fact, they were almost glowing. They were smiling. The one video produced with the 4 Israeli, the female soldiers, the former hostages, in a car, all speaking Arabic and saying "shukran," thank you. That, it's tough to build the meme that all of these Hamas are ruthless monsters who are raping, beheading, and killing. It countered that narrative, and so Bibi, remember his reaction to the ceasefire. He's telling the Ben Gavirs and the Smotrich, we're doing this right now because we're under pressure. But once Trump is in, we're going to rip the scab off and screw that second phase. Trump doesn't want to see the second phase go away. Now, I want us to, I think we should not ignore the fact that Trump was reading that yesterday. Now, Trump didn't sit down and write that himself. And, Ray and Scott know how papers that wind up in the hands of a president, those end up getting staffed somewhere. So I don't know who came up with this idea thinking this would be a good thing to do. But it wasn't just an extemporaneous moment of Trump freewheeling it. This was a prepared statement. Now, the other fact we need to look at this, that at least is in the news, and it's not getting a lot of coverage, is Witkoff is talking to the Iranians. So on the one hand, Trump's, Iran, we're going to kill you, And then Witkoff is talking to Iran, and Iran wants a peace deal. And Trump also wants a deal with Saudis. But the Saudis have been very clear. There's got to be a solution for the Palestinians, and that doesn't mean moving them to Jordan, Egypt, or Saudi Arabia. So I think I fully understand why Ray is alarmed and sickened by this, because that was when I heard that last night. My reaction was like Scott's and Ray's. I was good God, what's he thinking? But then as I stepped back and started thinking this through, recognizing that these are, if you will, opening positions in a negotiation. And Trump has always shown he backs away from the extreme positions. I mean, look what happened with have you seen the T-shirt? I survived the 24-hour tariff war.
Right.
They didn't even get off the ground. They didn't even have time to boost the price of tequila coming out of Mexico. So, it was... some of this is a lot of it's political theater, and it may be disturbing. I fully, I share Ray's his discomfort over that. But I really think part of what's going on here, and I may be wrong. It wouldn't be the first time, but I think that part of that was theater in order to prevent Netanyahu from going back and placating the Ben Gavirs and the Smotriches by tearing up the second part of this, the ceasefire. I think Trump wants to keep that intact and is going to maybe say some things that will be alarming on this side in order to placate the Israelis. But the bottom line is, if you're going to insert military, you're looking at it's going to take weeks or months to create that force. They're not just standing there on the tarmac, geared up, ready to hop on the airplane, because the logistics train that has to be put in place is significant. And then you get to the basic problem of they're not attacking the Japanese on Iwo Jima. They're going to be killing women and children. And these soldiers have been trained not to do that. At least if we got good officers, and good officers aren't going to stand by and let that happen.
Ray, when Larry was talking about the script the Times of Israel reported that Jared Kushner might have a lot to do with this, especially in terms of how this was articulated, right? The Riviera of the Middle East. We're going to do beautiful things with Gaza. So please react to what Larry and Scott have been talking about, and maybe if you could comment on this as well. Sorry. Right.
Had said those things early on. Okay, this is not new. Could be a Riviera. Could be really nice property to develop. Okay, so yeah, he could have gotten some of that. Again, I think it's part of Trump's feeling of exhilaration, having won the election and now having very little opposition anywhere. Okay, now I said sociopath. I would also add racist. And I would also say that obtains for both of those people at those two podiums. That matters, okay? The world is divided as never before. Take the BRICS with India, China, all kinds of other people with people of color, okay? The vast majority in population and now in GNP, okay? Against, what would be a good, NATO. What is NATO characteristic for? Well, they're all white, aren't they? So what's happening here matters in terms of public image, public diplomacy, and the fact that a lot of these people out there in the East in the BRICS have been subjected, in Africa, to colonialism and its worst manifestations, okay? And so I'm thinking now of what we did in Vietnam and how famously James Baldwin wrote to Angela Davis when she was wrapped up for her protesting activity, 1970 it was. He wrote her a letter, okay, when she appeared on the cover of Newsweek, chained, okay? And James Baldwin said, to see you on the cover of Newsweek chained should have touched off nerves in our society, but did not. And this is also what James Baldwin said. I wrote it down because it's very, very succinct. Sister Angela, as long as white Americans take refuge in their whiteness, they will allow millions of other people to be slaughtered, period. End quote. It happens to have been the case. And people looking on in the world realize that to have been the case. The world is divided, people of color against the lily white West. That's even more insidious than what's going on now in Southwest Asia.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to play one final clip and get your reactions to it because while on the one hand, Donald Trump definitely had a script, and there have been a lot of mentions about who is Trump now working for, given how much he placated Israel at this. Larry, you brought up Smotrich, you brought up Ben-Gvir. They are very, very, very happy right now with what Donald Trump said during this meeting.
Have you? I haven't seen any quotes from them. In fact, I'd be shocked that Smotrich would be happy with what Trump said, because he didn't say, "I'm going to ensure that God's promise to Israel is fulfilled and that Israel controls Gaza." He said, "America, we're going to own it." He didn't say that the Jews get it. He said America. Right. I'd be surprised. Smotrich, he's a fanatic, and he's going to go, whoa, wait a minute. This land's our land. God, so I'll sing the Exodus song. God gave this land to me. That's what Trump said there. It was sort of a punch in the nose to those Zionist settlers, because they are convinced from the river to the sea, this land God gave to me. And not to these Palestinians, not to anybody else. It's ours. And here's Trump saying, it might be mine, America.
Right. Well,
I
yes, that is what Smotrich in the Times of Israel has reported on this. They are talking about the plan to move Palestinians. They're not commenting. Ben-Gvir and Smotrich.
Yeah.
I mean, no one is. Netanyahu is not. They're not commenting on the semantics of how Trump framed it, which I'm not saying are not unimportant, because I think there was.
Yeah.
I agree. I think Scott, Larry, I think Trump was saying, this is the US's job. Like, we have to do this now. Well, what they were so happy about was this idea being floated out by a U.S. president saying, "Yeah, we're going to move all the Palestinians now because that's what Israel wants." But I wanted to get your final comments before we move on. I wanted to play, because there was the script that Trump had, but then there also was how he answered the media, and I want to play what he said here. I actually lost everything. Hold on. Yeah. Here we go. Hold on. Let me just share this. Okay.
Peter?
Would Palestinians have the right to return to Gaza if they left while the rebuilding was happening?
It would be my hope that we could do something really nice, really good, where they wouldn't want to return. Why would they want to return? The place has been hell. It's been one of the meanest, toughest places on earth. And right now, I've seen every picture from every angle, better than if I were there. And nobody can live there. You can't live there. So if we can build them through massive amounts of money supplied by other people, very rich nations, really quiet.
Oh.
Something for them in one of the countries, and it could be Jordan, and it could be Egypt, it could be other countries, and you could build 4 or 5 or 6 areas. It doesn't have to be one area, but you take certain areas and you build really good quality housing, like a beautiful town, like someplace where they can live and not die, because Gaza is a guarantee that they're going to end up dying. The same thing's going to happen again. It's happened over and over again, and it's going to happen again as sure as you're standing there, Peter. So I hope that we could do something where they wouldn't want to go back. Who would want to go back?
So I'll stop it there. Scott, I'll get you. I'll get you back in here, Scott. Final comments on this whole situation that we've been talking about.
Palestine belongs to the Palestinian people. Gaza belongs to the Gazan people. Hamas is in control. This is just ridiculous talk. It's insanely stupid, criminally so if he chooses to act on it. And it can't be taken seriously. Nobody will take it seriously. There's not a single aspect of what he said that is implementable. It can't be done. Even if he was the president of the United States and he gives an order, there is nobody capable of following these orders. So it's just a way. It's just a waste of anything. I mean, I can't even speak. This is how I was when I saw the press conference originally, because it took me a while to look at the press conference and try and make sense of it. But this is a level of inanity, nonsensical stupidity that leads me to believe that this is just all one giant smokescreen. That Donald Trump's, I think he's enjoying right now just creating this fantasy world that he's populating with things that aren't going to happen, because it's just spinning people up. And I think Donald Trump gets off on watching people get upset and get this, and he's thrilled by it, because nothing he says is going to be reality. What he's doing is creating chaos and anarchy, and being disruptive to a system that hasn't been working. And this is the one thing I have to say about a method to his madness. Let's pull off the stupidity of what Trump says, and let's just acknowledge, prior to that press conference, there wasn't a single viable plan on the table being floated anywhere about how to solve the problem in Gaza. Not a single realistic plan. being floated by anybody. Nobody was talking about anything. And so now if you're Donald Trump and you're the president of the United States and you say my mission is to bring peace, he could do it the old-fashioned way, which is shuttle diplomacy, have a Secretary of State run around, fly around, meetings, and nothing will happen because Israel will never let anything happen. The one encouraging thing on this is, I believe, is the absolute punch in the face to Benjamin Netanyahu. And I think Larry is 100% correct. This is Trump putting a marker on the table saying, you're done in Gaza. And Netanyahu can't act because Trump has now articulated something. If Netanyahu undercuts him, so Trump has checkmated Israel. Now, everybody in the comment, go, $100 million, Adelson's money, this, that, and the other thing. They're the most Zionist thing in the world. None of that matters in the world of Donald Trump. I just have to tell you, it doesn't matter. If he was bought out by Adelson, he wouldn't be doing this. If he was bought out by Adelson, he'd be letting Israel do whatever the hell they want. He'd be giving them all those bombs and saying, bomb away, send in your troops, do whatever you want. But he's not bought out by Adelson. And he punched Netanyahu in the face and he checkmated Israel. And now he's disrupting the entire world saying, if you don't like it, come up with a better idea. And now the world is scrambling right now to come up with a better idea. And again, I'm sickened by everything you said, but that's a hell of a lot better situation than existed during the Biden administration, where nobody was doing anything except sitting back and letting the United States, prevent the world from helping. What has Trump done? Because we haven't talked about this. He's cut UNRWA. I mean, he's withdrawn from United Nations. The money's gone. Why? Because from his perspective, that just sustained a failure. He is disrupting the whole thing, saying if you want to fund the Palestinians, come up with a different mechanism. And now people will say, well, wait a minute, if I'm going to invest, it has to be to achieve a result. It can't just be about sustaining decades of refugees in Gaza, which is all UNRWA ever did. God bless the people going in there and helping them out. All it did is sustain a concentration camp. That's it. That's all UNRWA ever did, is sustain a concentration camp. And from Trump's perspective, that's a failure. And he doesn't want to do that anymore. So he's disruptive. He's changing everything so that whatever comes forward has to be something new, fresh. And again, we know this. People are going, it's one thing for me to write a check to Medicine Sans Frontier or, the Sierra Club or whatever. It makes me feel good. I'm going to save whatever, the whales. Send a check off. I'm not saving the whales. I'm sending money off to people who have proven they can't save the whales. That's the reality. Funding UNRWA proves nothing other than sustainment of a concentration camp. So now, if you're saying if you want to save the whales, you got to come up with a plan. It's your plan. You got to bring in the people. You got to bring in the money. You got to finance. And now I'm not going to just write a check. I'm going to say, well, wait a minute. If I'm going to invest, I need assurances of what's going to happen. I need a structure. I need a plan. And I think that's what Trump's trying to create here through his madness. At least I hope he is, because otherwise, as I said before, he's gone totally insane. And I don't think he's gone totally insane. I think Trump's having a great time playing this game. Ray called him a psychopath. Maybe it's this kind of game that psychopaths play. But I just think that he's basically saying what has gone on hasn't worked, and it's not going to work. And we're not going to continue to invest in something that has no chance of working. So wipe the table clean, come up with an audacious opening gambit, fall back, and let's see what people have.
Well, yeah. And I wanted to, there's an interesting contradiction here too, because on the one hand, Trump strips everything naked. I mean, he just says what it is, and what to even put this out here as he did articulates actually what has been happening and what was happening under the Biden administration. That was what was the ultimate plan, was to expel the people of Palestine out of there. That's what a genocide does. It's not just kill everyone that moves, even though that's what Israel with U.S. weaponry and assistance was trying to do. But it's also get them out because they want to clear them out. And now Trump is articulating this which in effect is one could say it's stupid, psychopathic, and also in some ways informative. But on the other hand, too, it's like if Trump is going to fall back and say, well, let everyone now take care of this. One, Ray brought it up. What hasn't been mentioned, and we have mentioned it, you said in the beginning, Gaza belongs to the Palestinians. But what has been mentioned in terms of what Trump is saying is the Palestinians themselves, because they are the ultimate decider in reality of what happens in Gaza, and they certainly in Palestine proper, and they certainly gave a huge sacrifice to show that much. But Larry, I want to get Larry and Ray's final comments before we move on. I know we have other things to talk about too.
Well, the image that should be maybe filmed, put together, and played for Trump every morning are the Palestinians, almost 1 million of them or more, marching north into Gaza, north into rubble. Yeah, it's horrible, horrible conditions. No decent sewer, no guaranteed clean water, no stores where you can go buy food. And, you know, it's really sort of a testimony to the remarkable strength of the Palestinian people that I can see a lot of folks who had been devastated like they have been, like they've suffered over the last 15 months, would just sit in a tent, totally depressed, crying, you know, losing all hope. These people didn't lose hope. They got up, and they were carrying the stuff on their backs, carrying their children, moving forward into, they didn't know what. If nothing else, they were going to try to find and recover the remains of their loved ones. So we cannot and should not ignore that kind of strength. In fact, you know, the Palestinians often are ridiculed as being, you know, just a weak, incompetent people. And I think what we've seen over since the imposition of the ceasefire and their movement north is the exact opposite of that. And that's ultimately what will derail Trump's efforts. You know, yeah, we're going to move them off to Egypt and Jordan. You know, I've heard that from, you know, pro-Zionist Christian evangelicals for years. Right. Why don't the Jordanians would say, you know, because this is their home, and they're not going to leave their home. And at some point, they're going to get that message across to Trump, I think, that this is our home.
Ray?
Well, I think Larry is right. The resilience of the Palestinians is something to behold. Scott mentioned a psychopath. I said sociopath. They're equally bad. I see them both in Trump. And the problem is, lest they become the new normal, okay? Now, I haven't read a lot of the Western press over the last day, but I think it could be said that our little panel is very, very different from what has been appearing in the Western press, okay? And that matters. That matters. Because Americans are woefully uninformed about such important things as this and about Russia and Ukraine and everything else. That really matters. Matter of fact, I think I watched the whole Q&A after Trump made that statement. And there was only one and a woman, okay, who said, well, but President Trump, this is a sovereign country. You're going to take over. And of course, she was cut off. And instead, Peter Alexander would ask him, you know, so that's an uphill battle that we have to fight against. We can't let it become the new normal, okay? Now, with respect to Egypt and Jordan, I was watching Richard Haas today being interviewed by Katie Couric, and he let drop the fact that the king of Jordan and the president of Egypt are due in Washington in a week or so, if I heard him correctly. Now, that's important. These people are people on whom Trump or any other chief executive of the United States has lots and lots of leverage. Okay. It's a sticky wicket. I mean, there's a vast majority of people in Jordan who are Palestinians. Are you going to ask the king of Jordan to take still more? What happens to his reign if that happens? That's sticky, but he still depends on the U.S. financing of his regime. Okay, how about Sisi? Sisi is a similar case. There's billions of dollars every year. Four, I think, go to Egypt. Just one less than go to Israel, and he can't exist without our help. So, what's that mean? Well, I don't know what it means. Could Sisi be persuaded? Unlike by Blinken, who tried it the first time a couple of years ago, could Sisi be persuaded to open up the Sinai and accept all our tents from REI? And I don't know, but this is not as as outlandish as one might think. If Trump and the rest of the sociopaths and the psychopaths have their will here and press Sisi to do what they want him to do, even though it might mean suicide for him as well as for the king of Jordan. That really matters, and that's going to play out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to talk about, we've been talking about Gaza for the first hour or so, and I wanted to talk for the rest of the time about other matters. And I wanted to bring it to Ukraine. Vladimir Putin, Zelensky, everyone is saying they're willing to negotiate right now. Donald Trump says he is speaking to the Russians, or that his administration is. Unclear what that actually looks like at this moment. Supposedly at the Munich Security Conference later this month, there's going to be an unveiling of a peace plan. Unsure if it's going to be the same one that we've kind of had leaked in Newsweek. But I wanted to actually play, we've spoken about, Scott, the whether Putin will actually negotiate with Zelensky. And he said, yes. You corrected me. You said, yes, he will. And I looked this up today. It is very true. Confirmed it. He will negotiate with Zelensky, but he doesn't view him as a legitimate leader because he's not elected. Martial law is still in place. He is not actually the leader until there's an election. And he then won't be legitimately able to sign a document. And now Zelensky had this to say on Piers Morgan. Scott, I want your comment on this. Given the fact that negotiations are being talked about, Zelensky is actually demanding a lot more from the West, which seems to completely undermine any kind of negotiation process. Here is what he had to say.
Which support package, which missiles, will we be given nuclear weapons? Then let them give us nuclear weapons. Will they give us the missiles in the quantities that we can stop Russia? And I'm not sure of that, but I think it would help. Otherwise, what missiles can stop Russia's nuclear missiles? That is a rhetoric question.
So, Scott, I'll kick it to you. He is asking for their nuclear weapons through Western media. That seems to really undermine any kind of negotiation process, so to speak. But then again, this is Zelensky. So, Scott.
You're muted.
Scott, you're muted. Sorry. Okay.
Vladimir Putin will never sit down at the table with Volodymyr Zelensky. Okay, Putin has said that. His government has said that. Putin said, I can pick some people who could sit down at a table that included Zelensky. He's not excluding the fact that Zelensky could sit at a table with some Russians picked by Vladimir Putin. But understand how the Russians work. Zelensky's not legitimate at all. So do you think Sergei Lavrov is going to sit down at a table with Zelensky? No, not anywhere close. These will be such low-level people. And the other thing we need to be clear, Russia will not negotiate. I don't, you see, we have this concept of negotiation being sort of give and take. And, Russia will dictate. And based upon the terms dictated by Russia, there could be a negotiation on, how to bring about the terms dictated by Russia. But there's not going to be a ceasefire. I mean, one of the conditions of the West is, in order for it to be a negotiation, there has to be a ceasefire. You do understand that Russia will never enter into a ceasefire, because to do so, Russia loses the war. Russia has spent all this time building up the advantages it currently enjoys, and it has the enemy throttled. It has its foot on their neck. The enemy is exhausted. Russia has all the power necessary to finish the job. Why would Russia take its foot off the neck, step back, let the enemy come up, dust itself off, lift some weights, get some nutrition, and be ready to fight again? So no, there's some misperceptions out here, and I think Keith Kellogg and Donald Trump are going to be educated on this, and hopefully they are being educated on this right now by the Russians. I've been watching Larry watches them, Ray watches them. If you guys think you're seeing something different than me, if you think you're seeing, oh no, Putin's he needs to get out of this thing, and he's going to yield on this. He's not going to yield on anything, nothing. Again, I believe that if Donald Trump was smart, he'd be focused more on what a post-Ukraine conflict larger framework settlement could be. That's where the United States has the potential to negotiate. Why do I believe that? Because Russia has said so. If you remember, December 17th, Russia submitted draft treaties of a new European security framework to the United States and NATO. And Russia said, here's the treaty we'd like. We'd like you to read it and then sit down and let's have a discussion about it. So Russia's ready to negotiate that. Russia will not yield 1 inch on any of its fundamental demands on Ukraine. This is an existential issue of survival.
Yeah.
Russia has, its lineage comes from the Soviet Union that suffered 27 million casualties in an existential fight against Nazi Germany. The Russians will not yield. The Russians will not give in. The Russians will not surrender an inch. That's just the reality of this. Is an existential struggle. I don't think Donald Trump realizes that. I mean, when he sits there and he uses exaggerated casualty figures, he's just falling into what I call the Westmoreland trap. It's a trap that Westmoreland fell into in 1967 when he bought into the lies of casualty figures. Ray started an organization, the Sam Adams award, and it's not after Sam Adams, the American patriot from the Revolutionary time. It's from Sam Adams, a CIA analyst who called out the lies of the casualty exaggeration and the consequences of that. When Westmoreland bought into the lies, he set the United States up for failure. He was saying we're going to win the war because the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong are hitting this curve that they're not going to recover from, and all we have to do is reinforce and we're going to win. He said that in November 1967. Yet right around in 1968, the Tet Offensive came in, triple the numbers of people there. We weren't ready. We lost. Boom. Trump has fallen into the same trap, using fake numbers to set up conditions for a victory, fake references to a failed Russian economy, fake everything. You can impress yourself, you can fool yourself, but it doesn't change the reality. It doesn't matter how many times the Pentagon put out reports about North Vietnamese casualty. The reality was the truth on the ground, and that truth is what played out. The reality in Ukraine is the truth on the ground. The truth in Ukraine, the truth on the battlefield, the truth in Russia. And Trump is so far removed from that truth with the numbers he's citing that his plan doesn't stand a snowball's chance in hell. It's not going to get any traction. The Russians are going to give him the courtesy of one shot. One shot. Now, the Munich Security Council, Security Conference isn't that shot. That's a chance for, they're going to float something out there formally. Because understand, everything we've heard so far isn't an official Trump doctrine. We've gotten leaks. We have a Kellogg paper written back in April of last year, around which a plan was floated, supposedly. But remember, what the Russians were responding to, people say the Russians rejected the Trump plan. Well, all Putin said is the things we're hearing in the media aren't going to happen. But that wasn't a Trump plan. Trump never said that's my plan. Right now, the Wall Street Journal is talking about a 100-day plan put out by Keith Kellogg. Keith Kellogg hasn't come out and articulated that. This is leaked stuff. And I think it's basically either people close to Trump or people who are against Trump floating these ideas out there. None of them have any chance of success. I think Kellogg's going to float something in Munich, and it's basically going to be a straw man. Throw it out there, see what happens. The Russians are going to say no, and eventually, Trump is going to have to be realistic about this. This is why he's put, we're talking 90-day window. The Munich Security Security Conference comes in. It's going to fail. It's going to delay the phone call. It's going to delay the meeting because Trump should know, and I think the Russians have made it clear, you get one shot at this. We're going to give you one shot at saying what you need to say to make this war come to an end. We've told you everything you need to say. And if you choose not to say it, we no longer care about you, and we will continue. The Russians have prepared it. Larry and Ray, I'm sure you've been following the same thing. They have made decisions, strategic decisions about their economy, about their military, about growth that project sustainable growth, meaning the kind of growth necessary to sustain this war through 2027 into 2028. The Russians are playing that game right now. Budanov, the head of Ukrainian intelligence, says Ukraine can't survive through the summer. So the Russians have this thing all planned out. Even if the United States comes in and injects stuff that we don't have it to inject, but if we inject something that breathes artificial life, one more hit of the AED and the corpse comes to life, Ukraine can't last that long. It'll be all over. Meanwhile, NATO is falling apart at the seams. I mean, it's just collapsing as we speak. The realization they can't afford this stuff. I mean, the Germans came out and just said, we can't go to 10%. We can't even go to 5% because we don't have the budget to support that. Macron, we're going to double the French military budget, the French treasury. No, you're not. The British, we're talking big, but we're shrinking because NATO can't afford. NATO is collapsing as we speak. The European Union's frame, and so all of the things that would have to happen to make Ukraine viable is not. And then I'll leave it with this: that man you saw on the TV screen, Zelensky, that's a coked up, desperate man. Every word he says is so far removed from reality. He's a man in a panic, a sense of panic. He understands that the world is closing in around him. That's not the talk of a responsible person. No responsible leader would sit there and say, you have to give me nuclear weapons and missiles so I can deal with the Russian. Literally, I mean, he's an embarrassment to himself, to Ukraine, and to the West that propped him up. And all that does is solidify Russia's point is, we're not doing business with this guy. The Russians have a plan. Keith Keller's going to present a plan at the Munich Security Council. I'm telling you right now, I would put almost every dollar I own that the final plan for peace settlement is going to be the Russian plan because it's the only plan that counts. And the Russians have thought this through to a T. They know exactly what they want to accomplish and how they want to accomplish. My best advice to Donald Trump is find out what the Russian plan is, find a way to relabel it the Trump plan, and you can walk away with a win. But otherwise, you're just going to get mud in your face. And Russia isn't any other country in the world, except maybe China. China can step up to the United States as well. But Trump can't. I think we've had this conversation before. His threat of $45 a barrel, oil. One, that requires the Saudis to cooperate. And the Saudis right now are saying, we have a break-even margin at $88 or $85. We're already losing money, 78. You asked us to lower the price. We ain't lowering the price anymore because we can't afford to do it. Plus, this nonsense in Gaza, you want us to lower oil while you're committing, you're talking about genocide. So the Saudis are out of it. But the real factor here is domestic. The West the Permian Basin, West Texas. There's two kinds of oil fields there. One is an established well, $66 a barrel break-even point. The other one is new. The established well is like $34 a barrel break-even point. The new drills, $66 a barrel. If you drop oil to $45 a barrel, you're going to lose 1/3, 30% of America's oil production in 2 years is going to be gone, and it's not going to recover. That'll destroy the American economy. So there's no aspect of the Kellogg-Trump plan that has any viability whatsoever. that insane idiot on TV. Look, I'm not here to tell people what to do, but there was a South Vietnamese president back in the early 60s named Diem, who was causing a lot of headaches for the United States because he wasn't playing the game that we wanted played. And he ended up dead. And if Zelensky isn't careful, he's going to end up dead because he's become a problem, a huge problem for the United States, a huge problem for Europe, a huge problem for Ukraine. There's no aspect of him that factors into anything called a solution. And you saw it right there in front of you. That's insanity. That's literally a man who has lost his mind. Half of me wants to feel sorry for him, except that I remember in 2019, after he won an election based upon a peace platform, he held a war council where he pounded the table and said, I am going to take us to war with Russia. You got your war, pal. Fool around, find out.
Ray, let me bring you in here to respond.
What you've just gotten from Scott are what we call facts on the ground. The reality here. Now, what happened to this telephone call? I mean, what's been a long time now since Trump was going to make this telephone call? Well, I'm reliably informed that he's had people trying to get through to Moscow, but the answer is the Russians are busy. The Russians are busy. And they are busy. They've pretty much conquered the remaining redoubts there, preventing them from going all the way to the Dnieper River. Let me put it this way. The Russians have 4 aces in their hand. Trump has 2 deuces, okay? Trump is beginning to realize that. People are beginning to tell him, look, it's not like Joe Biden and Jake Sullivan, and these other guys told you. It's really, really serious. We've lost this damn thing. Now let's see if we can work this out. How do we get rid of Zelensky? Well, I know. We'll call elections. We'll call for elections, and he'll never win the election. Then we put somebody in there we work with. Like, Meanwhile, well, the Russians are just going ahead in their inexorable way. If we talk to them now, it's going to show up that we only have 2 deuces and they have 4 aces. So let's keep trying to get through, but let's not have inflated expectations. Now, what's going to happen in the long run is that there will be some talks, I believe. But it will be after Trump realizes that he's got an extremely weak hand, and it will all be PR, okay? What Trump will tell the American people is, I had a long discussion with my friend Vlad, and I persuaded him not to go into the rest of Ukraine west of the Dnieper River. He promised me he wasn't going to go into Poland. He's not going to go to take the Baltic states. So, yeah, well, Biden told you, of course, he was going to do that. I persuaded him not to, okay? Now, we reached a deal here, and there is some flexibility here. Russia doesn't want to take the rest of Ukraine. There will be a deal, but we'll have to take into account Russia's strategic security interests. And that's what Larry and Scott have been saying. And that's going to be a tough negotiation. What about NATO? Well, I think NATO is falling apart as we speak. And that's why I have this unorthodox suggestion that if NATO is falling apart and will have fallen apart in 15 years, what's to prevent the Russians from making a big concession and saying, okay, we won't insist that Ukraine not join NATO. We'll defer that. We'll defer that for 15 years. We'll revisit that. No way, either way right now, we'll revisit. NATO won't exist in 15 years. So I see the makings of a deal, but it has to come of a realization on Trump's part that Biden didn't know what the hell he was doing, neither did Blinken or Sullivan. And his security advisor has been ill-informed by Sullivan. So the real deal is possible. It's just that they have to face into the reality. And as Scott so well explained them, the facts on the ground and that is an expression the Russians continue to use. We're willing to deal. We were willing to deal. We did agree to deal in April of 2002, but now the facts on the ground are different. We're willing to deal, but only on the new facts on the ground.
Yeah, and Larry, I wanted you to comment on this in the context of, Ray talks about facts on the ground. So did Scott, and Scott also brought up the fraudulent character of this so-called peace plan that Trump's team has floated out. But also, there's also a timing thing here. We know Trump is full of bluster, but at the same time, he did say that Ukraine was going to be ended as soon as possible. Right now, we're only at the point of kind of an ambiguous talks. There's no meeting on the way. And Scott has just said Russia's not going to negotiate this. It's not going to negotiate what has been put out there thus far. And so my question to you, Larry, is what do you think about this? And in my estimation, it's like, why would Russia negotiate? So far, I don't see much seriousness yet here right now. Your thoughts?
Now let me quote a great American. Read and listen to what the Russians say and write. Ray, great American. Yeah, I'm quoting Ray McGovern. He's right. The problem here is Trump's assumption. Trump comes out of a real estate, doing real estate deals primarily. He's entered this assuming that Vladimir Putin is the bankrupt owner of a failing casino that's upside down on its mortgage, and that if they don't get a deal soon, they're gonna jump off the top of the building. Well, that's not the case. Vladimir Putin is flush with cash, owns the building. They're making more money every day. So Trump's problem is he has no leverage, or the only leverage that Trump has that could bring a swift end to this war is, one, pull the plug on all military assistance to Ukraine tomorrow, cut them off completely. The USAID money's already gone away, so that's a step in the direction. And then offer the Russians to say, look, we're not going to build the NATO bases in Romania and Poland. Okay. Russia would probably say, all right, now we got something to talk about. But Russia's made it very clear. Putin said it. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, said it. Sergei Rybkov, the deputy foreign minister, has said it. Nebenzia, the UN ambassador for Russia, has said it. Right now, the deal on the table is this. Ukraine must pull out all of its forces from Russian territory, which includes Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk. That's point number one. Point number two, that there is going to be no relationship whatsoever with NATO, that NATO is off the table. And the third point, which Scott alluded to, is that you're going to have a legitimate negotiator, someone who's politically legitimate in Ukraine for us to deal with. But Russia's not going to be dealing with Ukraine. It will be dealing with the United States on these broader issues. And look, Putin is holding a whole number of Trump cards, some of them gifted to him personally by Donald Trump. For example, it was Trump that walked away from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement, INF. And Russia said, well, they tried to save it. Trump walks away from it. What does Russia do? Oreshnik. They create a missile that would have been a violation under the INF that now can destroy any target in Europe. And there's nothing that the Europeans have to counter that. Thanks to George W. Bush and his abrogation of the ABM treaty, Russia is sitting there free to build air defense systems that surpass anything that the West could field. And it doesn't even have it on the drawing board yet. So Trump is at an actual disadvantage because, you know, what he can go in and ask Putin, oh, yeah, we'd like you to give up the Orushnik. And Putin's going to be, why do I give that up? You guys don't have one. You know, I'm going to keep mine. Thank you. So Trump is actually in probably the weakest negotiating position he's ever been in his life. And there's not a single thing that Russia needs from the West right now. And they don't, and they recognize that there's not a written agreement that the West can be trusted to uphold. They violated Minsk I, they violated Minsk II, they sabotaged the peace talks that had actually reached the point of producing a document in Turkey, I guess it was Ankara, back in April of 2022. So right now, the Russians have zero faith in anything that the West offers. So, you know, just pay attention to what the Russians are saying, what they're writing. They're not saying, oh my God, we're losing so many people. Boy, we need to cut a deal. No. They said, in fact, Sergei Rubkov said today, we're waiting to hear from the Americans a substantive deal. Until we get something of substance, you know, we got nothing to talk about. Have a nice day.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. How are you all doing? We're getting toward 10 o'clock. How are you all?
We're
Fine.
the witching hour. I'm going to turn into
Hey.
a pumpkin here. Remember, I'm an old man. I'm not a youngster like Scott.
All right. I think this was an incredible show. Thank you all for joining me, Scott, Ray, Larry. Actually, Ray, did you get a final word? I don't know if did you comment on this topic yet? Oh, Ray, I almost forgot about. Oh my gosh, Ray, please.
No, yeah, he commented before because I quoted Ray. Remember?
Oh yeah. All right, good. All right, I'm losing my own mind here. I'm feeling like Zelensky.
But Ray always
All right.
has words of wisdom to close us out. I'm
We should let Ray close it out as the
Ray.
the elder statesman.
All right, yeah. Final words, and then I'll a few announcements, and we can head out. All right, Ray, to you.
Unmute.
There
we go.
Sorry, Ray. May want to begin again just because you were muted.
Yeah, my wife would know how to do that, so would like to know how to do that. So please don't tell her. No, I just want to express my appreciation to you, Danny, and to my colleagues here for giving us the time and the air to say what we think is really, really important. Other than that, I think we're pretty much covered the waterfront. And I'll just not be long-winded as I usually am, and just say thank you. And I'm proud to be associated with Scott and Larry. Keep us in mind if you want to take this conversation forward.
Of course, yeah. No, it was an incredible panel. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Ray. We're gonna head out of here. Be sure to go to the video description to find all the ways to support this channel. Patreon, Substack, and more. Let me just thank all the folks who gave super chats. Thank you so much. I'm just going to put you all up on the screen now. It's very much appreciated. I know there are a few questions. I'm sorry we're not going to be able to get to the questions today. There are some good ones about what's going to happen in the Middle East, but a lot of this, we're just moving as we go. Because we're very early in the Trump administration. There's going to be lots of bumps, lots of developments that move very, very, very fast. And I'm glad that we all can come together and talk about them. Thanks to everyone who gave a super chat. I'm going to be taking about a week off from streaming. So be sure to keep a lookout for when I'm on back next. All right, everybody. Take care and good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thanks, Danny.